building out HDFC, then later on going to found CRISIL. What is that one core belief that has served you across all the roles that you've held in your life?
There is no substitute for hard work and thinking.
How did you even convince people that, housing finance was a real market?
Housing finance was giving against income, and that is what we did. The first time in the country, lending against income for long term.
And what are some of the timeless principles that you think apply across sectors? Because you've seen pharma, healthcare, paints as an industry, auto as well.
One, as I said, the CEO must think. Think about what is the nature of the business and how it can succeed in the competitive environment. Data must be there about mapping the environment and mapping the competition.
But coming back to identifying business models, because you do have a knack for identifying business models and finding the right scalable model at the earliest stages. How does one identify that?
So one has to map what is the competition doing, what is the opportunity, find a need and fill it. As I told you earlier, that is a simple way of thinking, that if there is a need, then somebody will make a beaten path to your door, or you will be able to make a beaten path to their door.
Hello and welcome everyone to the India Opportunity Show. Our guest today is one of the most respected and quietly influential figures in the business world of the Indian ecosystem, Mr. Pradip Shah. He's also a very common name in the boardrooms of India. He's held board positions at companies like Pfizer, Bajaj Auto, Nerolac Paints, and so many more. He's a Harvard MBA and chartered accountant who came back to India to build institutions from scratch. Very few people have seen India's evolution this closely, and I'm sure you will enjoy watching this episode. And if you haven't subscribed to the India Opportunity Show yet, please remember to subscribe. In this conversation, we go deep into how to identify the right business models, how boards should behave in uncertain times, and what founders and investors can learn from Mr. Shah's deep experience. Mr. Shah, welcome to the India Opportunity Show. Such a privilege to have you here with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here.
You've had such a fantastic career building out HDFC, then later on going to found CRISIL. What is that one core belief that has served you across all the roles that you've held in your life?
If you see these two companies, it was find the need and fill it. That was the simple and entrepreneurial message. But basically, there is no substitute for hard work and thinking. I went to Harvard Business School, and all that I learned at the end of 2 years, if you ask me, was think. That was the answer. I didn't have to spend so much money to think. Anyone did it. And you've got companies like Saint-Gobain, which is a 360-year-old company. They didn't have MBAs in those days, but they were very successful. So think through your solutions and think at it. That's the...
Absolutely. And I think you referred to yourself as the lowest paid Harvard MBA. What made you take an unconventional career path at the start of your career?
When I finished at Harvard, I got 3 job offers, and my wife was very keen that I work in New York because she loved New York and she studied in America. And I wanted to be in Canada because I had got an offer from Canada, and I thought they were the nicest people. And I'd reached here for that meeting there on a gorgeous summer day, spring day in Canada. It was so beautiful. So I thought we would stay in Canada. But then we always had that clash. And I had left HDFC here, which I'd started, on leave of absence. And I thought that I could go back, and India offered opportunities to start businesses which no one had started. And therefore, I thought there was an opportunity. Also, I was under the mistaken belief at that time that we would abolish poverty in 15 years. That was Mrs. Gandhi's goal. You remember that, abolish poverty. That was her phrase. And I thought we would abolish poverty and it would be a great country to live in. But it didn't turn out that way. But certainly opportunities to create new things existed then and exist now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as they say, that in crisis is where you find new opportunity. And you've truly capitalized on that in different aspects. But help me understand, going back to your journey with HDFC, at that point, how did you even convince people that, housing finance was a real market? Because that was a category creation.
That idea was mooted by Mr. H.T. Parikh. But his idea was to build and sell on installments. That was the way HUDCO operated. And I understood later on the logic of it, that because they wanted security for funding that they gave to a buyer. And therefore, if the property was their own till it was transferred, which would be after it was completed and so on, it would solve the legal problem of security for a loan. And so we created actually a project report on that basis when we went to IFC Washington, which funded, as you know, the initial funding for us. So that project report was based on installment. And then Mr. Parekh had the good idea. He said, go and see what other buildings, what the building societies do, because he was very enamored of the building societies in UK when he studied there. And so when I went there, I realized that it was really not housing finance by selling on installment. That was installment selling. What was housing finance was giving against income. And that is what we did. We started the first time in the country lending against income for long term to individuals, and we made it a success. And there was another legal originality that we did. And again, my advisors, they were, Suresh Shroff was an advisor, Mr. Yazdi Malegam of SB Bilimoria was an advisor. And they all say it couldn't be done because there would be no security. If a flat is not under construction, it doesn't exist. There's only air there. Yeah. So I was a chartered accountant, and I had that young person, brash, never taking no for an answer. So I said, okay, we'll find. And I gave an instant on the spot, repartee. I remember that. Saying, okay, we'll take interim security. And so that's what we did. We took interim security because the flat would be under construction. It would not exist. And people wanted money to pay for offline purchases for which they had to pay installments for flats. And so we started taking alternative security. So what I would do is a borrower would come. I would say, okay, can you make your wife or a husband, brother or a father as also co-borrower so that their income and cash flow would also be obligated to us? And if not, can you give your LIC policy? They would have 5,000 rupee policy. I said, that's fine. Give it as, assign it to HDFC as security. So that interim security concept enabled us to give loans. And the success of HDFC was founded on giving efficiently loans to individuals without bureaucracy and with no corruption. Yeah. So that was because in those days, the arrears of those there were cooperative housing finance societies, and there was HUDCO. HUDCO and my chairman, I was enamored of HUDCO because that's what was giving money at that time on installment basis. And our vice chairman, Keshav Mahindra, had been chairman of HUDCO. So he also felt that that was the only way to go about it. Till I kept sending, giving notes to the board meeting saying, no, we can't do it. We have to give it like this. And it finally got accepted. And we took this interim security and lending against income as the basis. So we recovered all our money. And that was the foundation. As I said, till that time, the cooperative housing finance societies that existed had 40% arrears. So effectively, they couldn't lend more money, whereas we started collecting back because we were lending against income.
That's fantastic business model innovation and so much foresight back in the day.
Because, as I was young and foolish, I never thought of failure and I never thought of taking no for an answer. My boss wanted me to set up HDFC. I was the leave of absence. My old boss there in ICICI, SS Natkar, who became chairman of IDBI and all, he told me, he says, look, this won't work, but go ahead. What do you lose? You've got 2 years to try it out and you'll come back to HDFC. There's ICICI. There's a position for you. So that's why, it was complete safety for me.
Amazing. So when do you think as a team you realized that the wheels were turning in your favor? Because, as a startup going through so much uncertainty and chaos at that point, when were the wins turning in your favor?
We raised 10 crore rupees. It was an effort to raise 10 crore rupees as equity. Deepak had not joined yet. Deepak joined in October. Right. And HT Parekh and I. So HT Parekh would make phone calls and Birla's promised 50 lakhs and Tata's promised 50 lakhs. Tata's gave 55 lakhs. Somebody promised 1 lakh. That money didn't come even though the issue was kept open for the full period. And I kept following up and no money came. So when we raised that 10 crores, we were in business. 10 crores was a big sum of money in those days. This is June 1978.
That's like seed round today.
It was like, yes, exactly. Now it's a seed round. So that was what enabled us to say, okay, so we sanctioned by October when Deepak joined. We had approved loans of 9 crores and actually disbursed 2 crores of loans. So in both individuals, corporates, etc. And we sort of got going with this model of lending against income, lending for the long term, and taking interim security. So people were very happy. There were very flattering word of mouth conversations going on that, look, this organization, HDFC, there's no corruption and there's efficient lending. and we were able to give loans.
And that message still holds till date.
HDFC is a superb name. Deepak built it up to a great organization, and then his team continued with the culture of honesty, integrity, efficiency of service. Wonderful.
Yeah, the legacy continues clearly.
Thank you.
But also tell me about, the initial dynamics within that founding team, because I'm sure that mustn't have been an easy time.
No, so it was very good. Our chairman never thought of nepotism as being negative. So, for instance, he always encouraged us, if you know someone, take that person. I mean, that's at least what I learned from him, that if you took someone because you knew that person, so long as the person was presentable, it was wonderful. And integrity was very necessary in lending business. In those days, corruption was very common, I must tell you. So, for instance, I met my wife there. She was sent by my chairman to interview her. She'd just come back from United States after her undergraduate degree. And he had known her grandfather. So he said, look, this girl wants a job. So I offered her a job on the spot. That's how so we were very happy to get good people into the organization, so long as they were presentable, intelligent, they used their mind, and honesty was then given. We didn't have to worry about it. And they made a great job of lending. And that's what encouraged the finance minister, H.M. Patel, for instance, at that time, saying, you are lending, we must give you support. And so the budget included us in this. So that was the way, because we foresaw that we would need more money. And therefore, we needed to get as much support from the government to raise money for ourselves as we could. And we did it, lucky.
And then did you do multiple rounds after that?
So we did continuous fundraising. And my wife was in the fundraising department. So we went to banks, we got money from banks, we started deposit schemes, we got money from deposits. We were gradually building a name for ourselves as an efficient organization, responsible organization, responsive, clean, and efficient. It was an effort of a team. So we had a superb team, superb people, honest to the core and wonderfully intelligent. So we worked very well.
That's amazing. So much power to do back in the day to be able to think through some of these innovations at that point. But coming to your journey of founding CRISIL, because that also was a category creation in itself and true business model innovation. So at that point, what insight led you to starting CRISIL?
So, I'd seen in the United States, Moody's and Standard and Poor's were part of the financial infrastructure. But surprisingly, outside United States, no rating agency had succeeded. There was no rating agency in the UK. Japan had some rating agencies, but they were muddling through. So we thought that this was necessary. So once I used to meet S.S. Nadkarni at board meetings of HDFC, and he asked me, "Sir, I want to do something in ICICI." And I said, well, how about, and I sent him a note on my HDFC letterhead in typed after the lunch that we used to have. I sent him a note, how about credit, apropos our conversation this afternoon, how about credit rating, credit reporting, and asset management? So he called me up and he said, I don't want asset management. People coming through the door, I don't want. Which Kamath changed later. He changed ICICI to a retail organization. But he says, credit rating I like. But he then moved to IDBI as chairman of IDBI, so he couldn't take it up. So when Vaghul came on the scene as a replacement for Nadkarni, and again I used to meet him at board meeting, and I said that, look, I had this conversation with Nadkarni. He says, done. And he lent his broad shoulders to support the credit rating idea. But my chairman, H.T. Parekh, would not allow me to go because he said, you'll fail. And he spoke to so many people. Keshav Mahindra, he was vice chairman. He said, Pradip, you're number 2 here. Why are you leaving? You don't, this will not work. Mr. Soonawala, Tata's brilliant man, and he epitomizes to me the Tata culture. He said, this will not work. People will drown you, and come and join me in Tata Sons. And he kept phoning me. He said, I've got a position for you. And IFC Washington, which had supported us in HDFC and seen what a success it had become, wrote an explicit letter saying that this will not work, the credit rating model, because Indian companies will browbeat you. That means Indian entrepreneurs and industrialists are very powerful. They will browbeat you. They will not learn. And you don't have the know-how. Moody's gave an explicit no. They said, sorry, this is an art and a science. You don't have either. It won't work. And so Mr. Vaghul was very pessimistic at one stage, and he said, we want to do it. And I said, sir, if you are there, we will do it. And that's how he said, okay, I will be there. And he lent his broad shoulders to the business, and we never looked back.
That's so fascinating because everyone else was telling you to not go against the grain, but you still did. So clearly there was a entrepreneurial energy with you.
And I said it had succeeded since 1909. Moody's and Standard & Poor's that succeeded in America. Why would it not succeed? So I understood what, I used to study. After that, I prepared the project report for ADB because one knew how to prepare project report, what kind of fees to charge, how to charge fees, etc. And so I sort of thought through, I was thinking all the time as to how to do it. It took me at least 9 months for my chairman to approve to go. More than 9 months. He first refused, absolutely. So, I said, Vaghul was patient. He said, look, we'll talk to Vaghul, to HT Parekh. We kept
Tell us more about that because to let number to go.
then Mr. HT Parekh at the end, he said, it'll break my heart if you resign. I'll give you leave of absence. I think in his heart of hearts, he felt that this rating idea would not succeed. And he wanted to give me a safety net. He was very fond of me, I must tell you, and of my wife, by the way. And so he didn't want us to fail or be flat on my face. And so he gave me leave of absence. And of course, he wrote a beautiful letters. We got married in Cambridge City Hall in America, and he wrote beautiful letters. That was his gift to us. And we've still got those letters preserved. That what can I give you? You're one of the brightest guys, etc. So I'm giving you this. That look, I'm very glad that you're going to Harvard, but also I hope you come back. And then when we came back, he again wrote a letter, handwritten in his beautiful handwriting, saying that, look, I'm very glad you come back. There's so much opportunity here. And I really thought there was great opportunity.
So with CRISIL, you didn't want to go back to HDFC because at that time also it was thriving.
In CRISIL, what happened was, first and foremost, as you pointed out in that question, that we had a problem. It took me 2 years to get going, really. I didn't lose money, by the way. The first quarter itself, I got a customer because I got a small team, L.K. Narayan and Jay Kumar, and we thought through and we came out with a model, and then we started offering our services, and we got one credit rating client, IPCL. And we thought through a strategy also that we would try and target what was seen as the AAA company and then go down and so on. And we had an answer for those because we were collecting fees from those people. So we had a thought process of how to address people who thought that they were AAA. See, don't forget, in those days, there was no interest differentiation. It was either good credit or bad credit. Then there was no differentiation amongst rated entities. They were amongst entities. So if it was a good credit, then it got the same rate of interest. And if it was a bad credit, it didn't get money. And so we said, no, there are gradations, number one. Number two, to encourage people to come to us and pay a fee for that service, we said, look, in the worst case, what? You will get a low rating. Don't use it. We will bury it. We will keep it quiet. So I used to have practices. Everyone in my office followed those practices. That if we got an annual report in a restaurant or a Taj or somewhere, we would hold it in such a way that no one else could see it, because we didn't want anyone to know that this company had come for a rating, because then if it didn't use the rating, people might suspect that they got a low rating. So we were so careful about it, and we kept our secrets very well. So we didn't let out to anyone that this company had come for a rating and got a low rating. And we did get threats, we did get, but we stayed our cool. We never abused or accused anyone of giving threats. Mr. Vaghul would get threats or even pressure, so much pressure, including phone calls from Delhi and governor calling and so on and so forth. And he would say, sorry, Pradip acts independently, I have no influence over him. But he would tell me quietly, he says, look, you do your own thing. These guys had caught, but do your own thing. And so he was fully behind us. And that helped us to remain independent, to do our due diligence and give a rating. And I also thought that my people were very bright. I had superb people. I was able to attract people. So everyone was not only participating in the rating exercise, but obligated to participate. So these MBAs, young engineers, if they knew something about that business or that sector or that industry, they were obligated to speak in the rating committee. And I used to have rating committees with not just my rating committee members, but also every staff member present in the office. They were not only invited, but obligated to attend. So that not only would they learn, but also they could contribute. And they would speak up if necessary. They said, no, I don't think you're doing the right thing. They would tell our rating agency, including me, that you're not doing the right thing. You're getting a too high a rating or too low a rating or whatever. And for example, I'm giving example, Sun Pharma Chemical, for Sun Pharma. It was in Baroda at that time, and my colleagues were so bullish on it. And I kept saying, but it's a small company. We've rated it. We rated 18 pharma companies by the time I left, I tell you. So including GSK and Pfizer and so on. And I said, what, this is an Indian company. How will it do well? There's no technology. There's no new product introductions. But they kept saying, and so we gave it a very decent rating. Because my colleagues would, in the rating, say, oh, no, you're wrong. So it is wonderful to hear that their conviction was expressed in such a articulate manner in the rating agency.
Amazing. This sounds so incredible because now we take these things for granted pretty much that, this is how systems were. But it's fascinating to hear about the origins of the story. But you mentioned that, Mr. Vaghul, obviously there was a lot of pressure, there were threats, and it wasn't easy. But you said in a speech that, he said something that really helped you guide.
So in 1990, it's about 2 years after we started, or 2.25 years after we started, my office was very despondent because we were not getting business. We'd made money. We had not lost money in any single quarter or year, but it was not flourishing. And so my people were very despondent. They were MBAs. They were, superly bright guys from IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Calcutta, IIM, and so on.
Yeah.
And so I could sense that despondency. And I went to Mr. Vaghul once and I said to him, sir, my people are very despondent. They think this will not work. And so on. And this, I explained to him that, we were we were meeting companies, I was giving talks. Everyone who asked me to give a talk, I gave a talk to, There was no issue. I would give at least 70 talks in the first year itself, and going to Coimbatore or Delhi or wherever. Whoever called me, I would give. And there would be 150, 200 people gathered and I would give a talk. So he said, okay, let me come to your office. And he came. I'd called my whole team to be assembled there, whoever was present in the office, because we had not even started an office outside. So it was all Bombay office. And he came and gave a talk. And at the end, he said, look, I can sense there's negativity, but please understand, you are such bright people. And he was a great motivational speaker also. So he motivated them by saying that you are so bright. And then if you don't have a job, please understand, I've got a job for you in ICICI. Don't worry about it. And I think that comfort level plus that motivation that they were the brightest guys that he had seen made a huge difference. My people never looked back. They were never despondent. And we luckily made breakthroughs. Then came the support from the from Reserve Bank of India, Central Bank, saying that, if you want to go for, or, Ministry of Finance, that we must encourage ratings and so on. But that came much later.
Right. And, talking about rating some of these companies, we can also segue into corporate governance issues because a lot of the media news these days is all around, Blue Smart, Gensol, Medica Bazaar, and so many startups that get it wrong with corporate governance. And you've been on the board of so many amazing companies that have literally set the legacy for Indian ecosystem at large. What do you think as board members one should think about decision making within the business?
So all decision making should be for the benefit of that company or in the interest of that company. I just give an example. When I was in CRISIL, we gave a low rating to an Ashok Leyland finance subsidiary. R.K. Talwar was the chairman of that company. R.K. Talwar is a brilliant man, absolutely brilliant man. And we gave a low rating because apart from the performance and so on and the debt, collections and so on and so forth, we thought that the governance in the board matter was not optimal. There were more salespeople of Ashok Leyland on the board than I would have liked. And so we mentioned that in our report. And Mr. R.K. Talwar asked to see me once. He came down from Pondicherry or wherever he lived, Bombay. He was staying in the Taj and he said, look, they're giving me a suite. Poor chap, he was such a simple man. He said, I don't ask for sweets or anything, but they gave me a suite. And so, he was such a illustrious man.
Yeah.
And he said, tell me, what would you mean by this governance issue? And I said, sir, if you have got on the board members, finance people or Ashok Leyland, the parent company's salespeople, they will naturally want you to give a loan because it helps in their sales. Yeah. And that is structurally unsound. And he changed the board. He changed. You can go back in history and see that there was a board change made by Mr. R.K. Talwar. So that we looked at governance from day one as to what the board and how we would ask the CEO, what is the contribution of these board members? If they were just silent and not contributing and they were there to ornament the board, that was not very satisfactory for us. So that would be factored into the rating. And we always ask for the goal and philosophy of the CEO and attitude towards payment of debt. There were some people who were transparent. They said, look, we'll pay back if we can. Some people who were very honest. They said, no, we have to pay our debt. And that's how it actually worked.
Right.
I tell you another example, Adi Godrej. I remember him talking about, not in the rating exercise, but this was outside. And he said that Noble Soya was not able to, he was doing badly and he was a big investor in that. And somebody mentioned that, oh, we won't pay back to ICICI. And, he said, no, if you don't pay back, I'll money in and pay ICICI. That was the attitude of some people, that they wanted to meet their obligations on time. And there were others, as I said, who said, if we can pay, we pay, you won't pay. So we factored that thought process, that attitude, that goal setting methodologies and so on into our rating exercise.
Amazing, because rare to find founders like that in today's
We
time.
met every CEO. I mean, I used to personally go to meet, I met Rahul Bajaj, and for instance, I'm now on his board in Bajaj Auto. But Rahul Bhai gave him his office at 20 minutes. He's recovering from a health problem and so on. We can't give him more. He spent with me over 40 minutes. And then, because of the concern that I had that, his people had told me, I went away. But he was so articulate, so brilliant. And so, of course, we got the best rating naturally because, but that was the way we interviewed every CEO, every person, and then gave a rating, not otherwise.
And what are some of the timeless principles that you think apply across sectors? Because you've seen pharma, healthcare, paints as an industry, auto as well. So which are the timeless
So
principles?
one, as I said, the CEO must think about what is the nature of the business and how it can succeed in the competitive environment. So that data must be there about mapping the environment and mapping the competition, but also thinking ahead that what will be required in the future. We've seen, for instance, the disappearance of the manual typewriter and the transition in India from manual to straight to electronic typewriter or computers.
Yeah.
We skipped the electric typewriter generation. So it was only people who thought ahead that could survive in this kind of. So that's what I would say, think. And if the company has to succeed, the CEO and his team or her team must think on not only of the present, but also of the future. Not only of their present business, but also of future businesses. That is how.
And how much weightage would you give to different criterias when you were
So one of the criteria that we always had in our rating exercise, and even today when I make investment decisions, is the tenacity and drive and competence of the management and the integrity. To the extent we can find out. It's not possible to find out everything all the time. But if they appear to be honest and want to reward their shareholders and not steal money from the company and so on, and they show demonstrated confidence in the past or so, then of course they are worth backing.
You would have seen it very closely in pharma as well, and the IT sector. How would you suggest global decision makers to act in boardrooms right now? There must be a lot of tension and indecisiveness within boardrooms.
So they will have to make a call as to whether this uncertainty, for instance, of tariffs, and I think you're referring to this whole thing in that context, will continue. To my mind, the kind of tariffs that Mr. Trump has talked about, 26% and 49% and so on, cannot continue. So he will rationalize. Of course, he has to be seen victorious, otherwise he will not. And he's already given exemptions, as you know. $644 billion worth of imports are already exempt. Then another 20 were ordered exempt. Then he froze the reciprocal tariffs and only continue with the 10%. So something between 0 and 10% as a tariff will possibly come in. It will definitely disrupt supply chains for everyone, for some of those products, but not all the products. For instance, I just give an example on pharma. You mentioned pharma. In India, we export about, from people say, $7.5 billion to $12 billion of exports. I checked with the finance minister, our brilliant commerce minister, Piyush Goyal. And Piyush said, look, there's no way of carving out from Trump pharma industry, even though it can hurt him in inflation. But he says we have accepted. And, since most of our products are generic products, yes, there will be some higher price that customers will have to pay, but they will get used to paying and our people will absorb some of the price and so on. So there will be sharing of the price differential. And anyway, the tariff will not be too great, as I see it, in a sustainable way. So if people rationalize that way, the CEOs, then they will take a long-term decision. But in the face of uncertainty of this kind, they cannot take a decision now.
Yeah.
As to what, they cannot take a decision on a 26% tariff or a 49% tariff and say, I'll put up a plant in the United States because there'll be a tariff for you. It's not possible. In this day and age, globalization is a reality. You can roll back up to a point, but you can't roll back fully.
Yeah, because all these decisions are supposed to be decades hence, right? And not short-sighted in any way.
And the CEO's role is to take decisions in the face of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And so that CEO has to take a call, has to take a position. And how carefully that person thinks through and takes a decision will determine the success of it.
How
And
are
the
you
global-
advising your CEOs right now?
So just now, if I'm connected with certain industries as it were, but I said no, we don't have to get panicky about. Yes, we will have disruption in the short run, perhaps if in the long run also, because there are tariffs on steel, steel, automobiles, the automobiles, of course, and so on. So we will have to face some disruption, but dust will settle, and we'll have to find alternative markets. If we were only selling to the United States, let's broaden the market. If we're selling to United States and other markets, can we sell more to the other markets? That's the way it'll happen. We have to accept that America is no longer the same kind of market place that we all thought of as it was.
Yeah.
And everyone will copy a little bit of that, the Europeans and so on. But relatively, it'll be at a much lower level. It will not be at the same level. So globalization as we knew it will no longer exist, but it will not be so bad as is suggested by the reciprocal tariffs that Mr. Trump has suggested.
Do you think there's a change in world order?
There will be a change in world order. You see, I'm expecting that with this kind of uncertainty that US has created, and this didn't start only today. They started with the sanctions and the SWIFT. Now, obviously, people who had dollar holdings felt that they should not continue with the dollar holdings to the same level. They're all reducing it. So if the dollar ceases to be a currency of choice as a store of value for big surplus holders or as a medium of transaction for cross-border transactions, then obviously the American influence will diminish. Now, this is happening, by the way. So, for instance, we have bilateral trades. Abu Dhabi saying, okay, we will bill you in yuan as they bill in China, or bill India in bilateral trades. We have swap trades, etc. That diminished the role of the US as a currency, US currency as a store of value or a medium of transaction. And that automatically brings down United States. So there will be change of order. If US becomes less economically powerful, whether others substitute or not, but the power will get dissipated. Yeah. And so India will have to deal with others. And India, thank God, is staying multipolar, thinking of a multipolar world. And I hope they don't antagonize the Russians or the Chinese. Chinese, we already done it with the Quad, which is not correct. I personally believe that they should not have done it. I did advise Mr. Modi when he was chief minister, but not anymore. So I would, if I were given a chance, I would tell him that, look, rethink your strategy of the participating in the Quad.
What risks you think can potentially derail the India opportunity? Because there's so much hope and optimism around this is India's decade. But are there any risks that you foresee?
Enormous number of risks. One is, of course, our bureaucracy. It is overwhelming. Mr. Modi said, "I will reduce, make it ease of living and ease of doing business." It's impossible for him because he has to operate through his bureaucracy. And the bureaucrats do not understand what it is. They have never worked outside government. In government, pushing files, delaying things, not taking decision in time is par for the course. There's no accountability, there's job protection. So bureaucrats cannot be molded to the kind of thinking that Mr. Modi has. Number one. Number two, we have abysmal poverty. We have to address that poverty. We must at least assure our people that they'll get 2 square meals a day, then they'll get roti kapda makan, at least that much we must try and ensure. Then it can be a full-fledged democracy. But our democracy takes precedence over some of these issues. And so we have people saying 3-language formula and 2-language formula and all that, and religious fabric being unfortunately shred. We are a multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious society. We must continue with that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And these are very these are big risks, right? That we have to keep in mind while, there is so much hope and optimism around what will happen to India, but one has to keep these things in mind. But, coming back to identifying business models, because you do have a knack for identifying business models and finding the right scalable model at the earliest stages. How does one identify that?
So one has to map what is the competition doing, what is the opportunity, find a need and fill it. As I told you earlier, that is a simple way of thinking. That if there is a need, then somebody will make a beaten path to your door, or you'll be able to make a beaten path to their door and sell the product, So for instance, I'm just saying grow trees. We saw a trend that people wanted to plant trees because they wanted to fight climate change. They wanted to, each individual wanted to show that they could fight climate change or do something for climate change. So we had to make it affordable for individual. And we give them a reason to plant. Greet with trees. That was our objective. So my son also went to Harvard Business School, by the way, Karan. And we created this Greet with Trees model so that not only would they get the satisfaction of fighting climate change by planting a real tree in public lands, but also they could dedicate it by means of an e-tree certificate to greet a friend for a birthday, anniversary, New Year, and thereby there would be some small private gratification plus leadership role. They would tell others that, look, you can do something to fight climate change, you can plant a real tree. That's the kind of thinking creates a new model for working,
Yeah.
And we hope that, everyone can do something like that. It's not just growth that will bring you business, it's growth with differentiation that allows you to succeed,
Yeah. And how do you build differentiation within the model?
So, as I said, you map and then you figure out what could be appealing to a customer, a potential customer, not necessarily only an existing customer, but could you create a new market, a new marketplace for products, or the existing customer would switch from something else? That the product must satisfy a customer's need. That is the.
And since you interact with so many young founders even today, what are some red flags that you potentially see in different business models or founders that you want to stay away
It's a
from?
it's an excellent question. I'm on the Trifecta Venture Debt board. We've done 200 deals, and sometimes I feel that people are taking too much risk in the pursuit of growth.
Yeah.
Whereas growth by itself cannot be an objective. Growth with profitability, of course, everyone should aim for, but growth by itself. So that is one. Second, they get carried away by their own original idea, but without thinking through whether there is a moat around that idea where people can enter that business or not enter that business easily. They think that by being a first mover, they'll get an advantage. It doesn't always work like that. Somebody with deeper resources, deeper pockets, or a better idea or a better product can always overtake you. So a little humility, learning from everyone, let noble thoughts come in from all sides. That's what the Rig Veda said. That they should be ready for accepting possibilities which are different from what they are thinking.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of private market investors guided the founders to go towards growth at all costs, and we've seen all the repercussions as a result of that. How would you suggest founders build their businesses today with a delicate balance with their investors, right? Or how to have a healthy founder investor relationship?
So founder-investor relationship is very critical, as you, I think, allude to here. The founder must not give the investor the impression that there's going to be overnight money. Because that in no business have I seen that overnight. I mean, some artificial like open intelligence, their open AI has become suddenly worth so many billions of dollars. Very few of that kind really exist. So one has to be prepared for a plod, and one is therefore to get the investors who are prepared for a little bit of time to get their returns, and also are willing to go through ups and downs, because very rarely does a business just take off like a rocket, And so if people are prepared, then the investor is in sync with it, with the entrepreneur. And that is very important to getting entrepreneur base. There are whole courses, as you know, on how to manage your shareholder base, as it were, for listed companies. So if you suddenly stop paying dividends, if you've been paying for 50 years and suddenly stop paying dividends, you will lose your shareholders. They will be very upset with you.
Yeah.
So you have to manage your shareholding base before you...
And given you have exposure both to public equities and also, venture debt, like you mentioned, which is the asset class that particularly excites you the most, and where have you spent most time?
I was a debt guy, so I was a risk assessor at one time. Then I became a risk taker when I became private equity, investing in equities. Now I feel that the listed market offers great opportunities with liquidity and with dividend income and with relaxed approach, so long as you have a distributed risk profile. If you take concentration risks, then you should go for private equity because then you get information, you can study it, and then. But if you go for relatively smaller amounts distributed over a large sector, then the public markets give you very handsome returns.
Absolutely.
Worldwide.
Yeah. Risk reward ratio, I think, is better than what private can do in comparison.
Absolutely.
What kind of entrepreneurs excite you the most today?
So somebody who brings an original idea is, of course, very exciting. Then somebody with original idea and tenacity and drive to overcome problems as they arise, that is even better. And somebody with that, plus a little bit of goodwill and willingness to accept people and build a team, that is the best.
But how do you identify it at day zero?
So one can go make mistakes galore, and one does make mistakes.
Yeah.
But with that, one can try and assess people on their ability to interact with others and take them on board and share thoughts and not share thoughts, because some things you have to, keep guarded. But if they are willing to take people on board and work as a team, that's number one. That the ability, tenacity, drive from their past track record, from their experience, from their attitude, from their goal setting, that become very important. So competence and integrity, of course, are the basis on which any investor makes a judgment on author.
Any red flags that you've noticed with all the interactions you've had with founders?
So I think people who want quick money are dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think if they have a philosophical bent of mind, they are very desirable to my mind. That they must accept that time doesn't always work in their favor, sometimes works against them. Not everything will go in their favor. Do they have the tenacity and drive to overcome problems? Do they have resources, reserves, both of energy and ideas to address problems as they arise? That's
Yeah, I think, and last and final question before we wrap up, success is celebrated very differently today. I think the younger generation wants it quickly and wants it very fast, but you have set an example of an exemplary life which is scaled and compounded over decades, right? And you have always spoken about purpose and integrity being at the heart of everything that you do. So what would your parting message be to our young audience?
So I was a chief guest on Saturday at a function, and they were asked a similar question. I said this, that first, for individuals, in young entrepreneurs, first achieve financial security for yourself, because without financial security, you can't achieve anything. But once you achieve financial security, don't keep pursuing money. Money is only a tool. It's not everything. And therefore, have a purpose in life. Have a foundational philosophy that after you achieve certain financial security, then you will work for the good of mankind or good of all living beings, or some purpose that you have in mind. Maybe knowledge, increase the knowledge base of the world, as it were. But that purpose must drive you after a certain point. And if that is not there, I think you're a failed human being.
That's incredible parting advice. Thank you, Mr. Shah, for coming on the show.
Thank you. I must tell you again, it's the most interesting conversation I've ever had. I must have given scores of interviews. Scores.
It's not every day that you get to sit across from your icon and ask them all the questions that you wanted answers to. And that was the day for me today. If you enjoyed watching this episode, please remember to subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications every time we drop another one.